Hi guys, welcome to another edition of iWIN Live. Tonight, as you know, is our interview edition. So just setting up the last final things, and I will introduce our special guest. But just a couple quick reminders. We're going to be doing another one next Tuesday. Next Tuesday is going to be an hour earlier, so 8 o'clock, and I will be joined by a couple of mystery guests. And then we're actually going to go the following Tuesday as well. And another sweepstakes person that you may or may not know, but you'll get to know that night, is Karen Goodwin. Karen was featured on the show Sweepstakers. It's probably 8 years ago, 7, 8 years ago, something like that. But she's got a ton of stories, so we'll have her on. So you got 3 Tuesdays in a row, tonight, and then 8 o'clock next week, 8 o'clock the following week. Let me make sure this transferred right, and then we will get started. Thank you guys, as always, for joining us. So tonight, I'm really excited because this is a person who I have personally looked up to in sweepstakes. This is one of the first people I ever heard speak at the national convention. Every year there's a big convention hosted, and I met this gentleman in Minnesota. I really didn't even meet him at that time, but have met him now numerous times since, had numerous conversations. But I walk into the room, and some of you guys have heard the story. Up on the screen, there was a phrase that said luck plus skill equals winning. And I use that phrase all the time, and I still give him credit for it. I love that phrase. I actually have a mouse pad that says luck plus skill equals winning. And this gentleman got up, and at the time he had won almost 200 trips. And I was just blown away. Like, I thought I had won a decent amount of stuff. I had won a truck. I'd won a few trips. But, to hear him speak and to hear his logic and methodology behind some of it really resonated with me and changed a lot of the way I looked at entering. So I'm really excited to bring him on. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to Mr. Steve Dadolf. Steve, thanks for joining us tonight.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Well, we really appreciate it. For those who don't know, Steve lives out in San Diego, California. So that's why we did it slightly later, because it's still only 6 o'clock out there for you.
Yep.
So, Steve, tell us a little bit about yourself, about your background. Just who is Steve?
Well, I guess you might say I've led kind of an adventuresome life. And it started out right at birth, actually. I was born at the West Point Military Academy, which is kind of an odd place to be born. My father was stationed at Stewart Field next door, and West Point had the only hospital. And I've moved around all over the place. I've been to 14 different schools before I got to college. I've had time when I lived on a Pacific island halfway between Hawaii and Australia, where the Air Force would shoot Minuteman missiles at us, and we would try and knock them down with anti-missile missiles. And I've been in all 50 states and 106 countries. Worked on the anti-ballistic missile program, worked on the designer of the Patriot missile program for the Gulf War. I got stuck in Iran in one of the last planes to get out before the Shah fell. And all kinds of craziness has happened to me. So I consider myself to be quite adventuresome and just like to keep active. I've run a couple of half marathons when I turned 60, and I'm still going.
So what made you decide that San Diego was going to be home?
Well, in all my travels, I used that opportunity to see what other places look like and what other kinds of living were. And I got to San Diego and said, this is it. And so when I've had to go on a trip and go someplace in the snow or wherever, I always know I can go back to San Diego. And the slogan, America's finest city, really fits right. It's the best weather in the country.
Well, awesome. So obviously you're a sweepstaker. What started the interest and the love, or how did you ever even find out about sweepstakes and start entering them?
Well, I came back from a stint overseas and had just gotten married and was looking for something challenging. And I happened to pick up Contest Newsletter like so many old time sweepers did. I still remember reading the back page of that, and it listed the people who had won things and what prizes. And I looked at that and said, wow, that's something that's really interesting. I showed it to some friends and they said, that's a scam. There's no way anybody could win stuff like that. And that sort of clicked my challenge right off the bat. And I started right then. And it's funny, if you look at the history of Contest Newsletter, I think most people, well, some people may not know, but they had, I don't know, maybe 10,000 subscribers at one time. And Roger Tyndall and his wife, well, one of them was out running on the beach one day in Florida, and they happened to run into the marketing guy for Publishers Clearinghouse, who talked them into getting a stamp in Publishers Clearinghouse like the rest of the magazines. And would you believe, over the next 4 or 5 years, they went from 10,000 subscribers to 600,000 subscribers. And at the top, they sold it. They sold it and got out. They were really knew what they were doing, and they got out. And it really didn't survive much after that. They had hit a peak. By the way, not related to that, there's a really great book out on the history of Publishers Clearinghouse, if anybody wants to read it. I put some information out on Facebook at one time, and I can do it again. But it's just a fascinating book on Publishers Clearinghouse, written by a ex-vice president of the company.
Interesting. So what was the first thing you ever won?
I'm not sure it was the first thing I ever won, but I won a TV and a VCR from a slogan contest for Gleam toothpaste. And, one of these 25 words or less, I don't remember what the exact theme was. And I think that was my first prize, although there may have been something else smaller in the middle there, but I'm not sure.
That's the first one you kind of remember.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I know you from winning trips, and a lot of people know you from winning trips, kind of like they know me from winning trips now, which is neat. What was the first trip you ever won?
I won a trip to Bermuda. I was living in El Paso at the time, and the guy called me up and told me that we won this trip to Bermuda. And I remember, and he said, well, you got to decide now if you're going to accept the trip. And I said, well, before I can accept the trip, I've got to decide what to do with my 2-year-old daughter. If I get somebody to watch, he says, oh no, you got to bring her along, that they'll pay for her as well. And the three of us went off to Bermuda, and that's what started it all with trips.
What point did you say, hey, you know what, this is going to be part of my everyday life? Was it back when you first got Contest Newsletter, or was it a certain trip or a certain prize?
No, I think it was right when I first started. One of the things that's somewhat different that I have that other people may not have is I need to be active on something all the time. And to me, while I really like winning prizes are great. It's great to walk into Outback Steakhouse with a $50 gift card and not have to pay. But to me, it's the challenge. I'm more driven by the challenge than I am by the actual prize. I think that the old thing that you talked about, luck versus skill, I think if you can put some skill in there, that's what drives me, is to try and figure out how to do some skill that might make you win something that other people might not win. And so I'm just challenged every day to do something, learn things, and to try and win.
It is. I mean, I fully agree that luck definitely plays some role in what we do. But the skill piece and knowing what to enter and how many times to enter, and maybe even a skill contest, can really go much further to helping you win more.
Yep.
So one of the things you talked about in Minnesota the first time was, which I found extremely interesting, was your calendar. Do you still pull out the calendar at the start of every year?
Yeah, I actually have it right here. It's kind of hard for people to see, but
I have crossed off this year.
I have a calendar that I fill out at the beginning of the year. It's I've got half the year on one side and half the year on the other side, so you can see the whole thing at one time. And at the beginning of the year, I marked down the important dates of things I might win a trip to: the Super Bowl, the All-Star Game, the Country Music Awards, the Oscars, anything you can think of that would be a great experience that I would really like to go to. You're gonna not, maybe, I don't know about my ego, but I'm assuming I'm gonna win one of those. And so I just mark down where they are on the calendar, so that if I win a trip that's not to one of those, I don't want to accidentally plan a trip that will be on one of those days. So I purposely don't go on any trips during the Super Bowl or things like that because I assume I'm going to win one. And that's how I use my calendar.
I don't think that is ego at all. I think that is being prepared, and like that to this day, I remember that conversation listening to you up there, and I said, wow, yeah, that makes sense. And so now in the back of my mind, I look at things, and it's funny because when the national convention is scheduled, I know as the owner of a website, I probably need to be there. So there are very few things that I will take the chance to enter because I don't want to put myself in that predicament of having to make that decision.
The other thing I do is I mark all the NASCAR races on each weekend. And so if I have the opportunity to then go on a trip where I can pick the date, I might pick it to go where there's a NASCAR race so that in effect I get 2 trips out of 1. I'm already there. I can get some NASCAR tickets and I can take in a NASCAR race while I'm on another trip with.
Excellent. So what is, and I kind of know the answer, so it's kind of an unfair question, but a lot of people don't. What's the one prize that you just can't win?
Yeah, everybody who knows me knows it's a car. I've been sweeping for 40 years, and I've won. I can't think of anything else that I wanted to win that I haven't won, except the car. I keep trying. And if you know who else lives in San Diego here, Steve Shanahan down the road, won his 20th car not long ago. So I've got some friendly competition, somebody to look up to, somebody that I could be challenged with, and I'm still trying. I've been in Southern California used to have a lot of key turns. And so I think at last count, I've been into 15 key turns. Had one of them where we came down to 2 people left. One of them was me, and I still didn't win. So it's gotten to be a sort of a joke, and I'm going to keep trying, but it hasn't happened yet.
It is kind of fun, and we've had fun with you at the convention and different things with it. I really hope you win one. One thing we didn't cover is how many trips are you up to right now?
292 as of a few weeks ago. I've got 4 that I've won during the pandemic quarantine that I'm waiting to go on. Hopefully we'll get to do them early next year.
I can relate. I have 4 trips this year. I have 2 of them that I'll be going on next year. One, I was able to get done. The other one, I did. They gave me a payout, and then I have 2 that I'll be hoping to take it sometime next year. So you have another half, and a lot of us have met Pat at the conventions. The one thing I didn't know is you got married before you started entering sweepstakes. How'd she take this? How did she feel about it? How did it start? And then maybe it's transformed to how it is now.
Well, it's actually, I think we got married probably, in the same year I started sweepstakes. And I never thought about that until you mentioned it, because I never related the two. She likes to go on trips, but doesn't like much of anything else involved because she knows I'm an addict and she knows I'm going to spend a lot of time working on it and would rather I didn't. For her, if she wins a $25 gift card to go to the restaurant, that to her is a big win. For me, I'm going for the big stuff. And so the only time we have a real problem, I guess, is she only wants to take a trip once a month. And so occasionally we'll win 2 or 3 trips in 1 month, and that really gets her going because she thinks that's too much running around. Me, I'm ready to go. You just tell me I can go tomorrow, and I'm on the way tomorrow. But she needs to do some planning ahead of time.
I can totally relate to those statements. I have drug Lee on last minute trips before, and called her in the middle of meetings and said, hey, we need to be on a plane in 2 days. Can you make it work? And somehow we've managed to figure a lot of them out. Does your wife have something maybe that you've won or she's won, or favorite trip? Or does she have a favorite memory?
Probably her favorite trip is the same as mine, although people ask me my favorite trip when I meet somebody and I say, well, I really can't give you a favorite. I'm more like a top 10, but probably my favorite, I won a trip for 4 on a $650,000 private yacht cruising around the British Virgin Islands for a week with all air conditioned yacht with a private captain, our own captain and cook. So there were 6 of us on this yacht, the 4 of us and my daughter and our husband, and the captain and the cook, and we just had a hell of a time. I mean, my daughter has had a chronic illness, and she was really stressed out before that. And this trip for a week just really calmed her down so much that it really helped her in the long run. So it's been something that's really special.
Excellent. What are your favorite type of sweepstakes to enter, or your favorite methods to enter?
I don't know that I have a favorite, except I like daily entry. My feeling is that there are a lot of people who can't spend the time for whatever else they have in their life, which is good because I don't. I'm addicted, so to me it doesn't bother me. But for people who are time constrained or just don't have the inclination, I like to work on dailies because I'm going to do something that makes sure I don't go to bed at night until I've done every one of my dailies, and that means even if I'm on a trip. So I can be anywhere around the world at the oddest hour, and I'm still doing my dailies to get done before I go to bed. So I like that. I still do some mail-ins. I'm still probably right now, I'm probably mailing about 10 envelopes a day. Obviously, it goes up and down on what's available. Other than that, I don't like referral things. I know you're not a big fan of that either, but otherwise, anything else is fair game.
You know, it's interesting you speak about dailies, and one of the challenges I put to iWIN members earlier this year, including myself, was take a calendar and check off every time you get your dailies done and see how many days you can go in a row without missing. Because I think a lot of people say, well, I enter all the time, I enter every day, but yet when it all comes down to it, they actually miss 1 or 2 days every week. And someone like yourself, for me, that's going to make a big difference in the odds in the long run. So
and I think that's true. And in fact, as you know, at the conventions a couple of times, I've asked the audience, on a mail-in basis, what do they do on Sunday? Do people mail 2 entries on Saturday for Sunday? Do they mail 2 entries on Monday? Do they just take Sunday as a holiday? And it's interesting that, that's probably maybe 1/3 of the people try and get an extra entry in for Sunday, and the other 2/3 take a day off. And I happen to be one of those who take a day off. I do. It's just one of those things I've just settled into, not mailing anything extra for Sunday.
Yes, if it's a mail-in, I actually do the same thing. So if I'm mailing something once a day for a week straight, I have my 6 envelopes ready to go. If it's a holiday, if it's a Sunday, I don't. We do have a mutual friend who lives near a post office that will stamp a Sunday postmark, and they will go religiously every Sunday to mail their entries.
Yeah, that's good.
So you definitely have people like that. How do both you and I feel it's very important to thank a sponsor and let them know you appreciate it? How do you go about thanking a sponsor?
Actually, I start right with the first notice. One of the things I want to do when I'm talking to a sponsor or the judging agency or both is I want their email address right off the bat, because to me, that's the way to keep in touch. That's the way to say things that aren't going to get misconstrued or forgotten or not passed on. And so right off the bat, I'm thanking them even when they first notify me and all through whatever back and forth we have going on. And then if it's a trip, quite often at the end, I'll send them a trip report telling them how the trip went and whether we had any problems. And then even then, if there were some problems, I sort of brush it off and I just give it to them as a feedback, but I make sure that they understand that I expect those things will happen and that we had a great time. And then the last thing I look at is I try and figure out what the sponsor was trying to achieve with the sweepstakes. What kind of marketing thing were they trying to achieve? Were they introducing a new product? What were they doing? And I try and give them feedback that they succeeded so that they'll want to continue doing that. So that's part of my thank you process.
No, I think it's very important. And I think you bring up some excellent points along the way. And being appreciative and thankful throughout the process. You and I both know the people who plan these trips for you, some of them have an awful lot of power and ability to do things for you, and even extra over and above.
Right.
I'm sure that you can bring up numerous times that you've had extra tickets, or all of a sudden your tickets, you were up in a suite or in a loge or club access, just because they liked you and they knew that you weren't going to embarrass them in any way. You were going to represent their product well.
Absolutely. Yep.
And you and I both love to win NASCAR trips. That's so important in NASCAR, is the sponsorships and the branding and how important that is.
Yeah, and what's really been nice, and I'm sure you do the same thing, is how many times I've actually been able to sit down and have breakfast or lunch literally with a driver. I mean, literally sitting across the table and having an opportunity to talk to him and ask him some of the things that you might never learn just by watching on TV.
It is. I mean, NASCAR, both you and I are NASCAR fans in general, but for those who are not, the access that you have is just incredible. Where if we win a trip to go see the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the odds of us having breakfast with Tom Brady is not going to happen that often.
Right.
But with NASCAR, it's amazing how many times you will actually get to spend some time with the drivers, even if it's for 15, 20 minutes for a Q&A, photo op, different things. They make themselves so much more available than other sports.
Yeah, I've actually flown on their company plane going from the track to their office. I've held the flag down in the pit to tell them where to stop. I mean, all kinds of things. It's amazing.
That's incredible. You see a lot of new sweepers, and you see a lot of people getting into the hobby. What is something that you see as a mistake that somebody in the hobby just continues to do over and over? Is there something that kind of stands out in your mind that you're like, you're missing the boat on this?
Yeah, I guess I would think that the one thing I see is that people may not spend enough time or effort in trying to find restricted sweeps. To me, restricted, I think it's pretty obvious what it means. I mean, anything that's going to restrict other people from entering, whether it's a sweep that's only open in your home state, your home city, requires something special that you can do that other people don't do. It's only open for a week. It's only open for a day. You've seen some on Facebook that are only open for a couple of hours. And I think that one of the things I like to do is devote some time every day, certainly every week, into looking for some of those things. And I think a lot of people see some great prizes in the national sweeps, and I do too, and I love to enter them. But to realize that it's the restricted ones that are going to give you some of the extra wins that you really want. And I think a lot of people just don't spend the time looking for them.
You're right. I mean, it's something that I really try and advocate to is look local. Why I'm very happy with what iWIN has accomplished in putting out sweeps. I couldn't even put out everything that Florida has to offer, let alone all the other states. So, what I really stress to members is look at your local TV stations, look at your local radio stations, look at your local teams. Some of you guys just saw I did an unboxing from Orlando City, and I won a great prize pack from them. So that's really important, really key.
Yeah, one of the things I've seen on forums off and on during the years, and I've had some friendly arguments with people, is you'll get people who will say, I'll tell them what we just talked about, and people will say, well, in my town, there's no locals. And my answer is, they're there, you just haven't found them. I mean, unless you live in the middle of the desert, which I agree, there are some people who do, there are going to be some locals. They may be difficult to dig out, but I mean, with restaurants now having their own websites and car washes having their own websites, I mean, everybody has a website, and therefore everybody has an opportunity to give something away. And so right there is opportunities that people are missing out on.
Both of us live in tourism meccas. You in San Diego, me in Orlando. So there are so many that we have access to that everyone's giving tickets away for different things. And, because so many tourists are always trying to come in and they're trying to compete for all those tourism dollars. All the local companies, just like in San Diego and Orlando, both have a ton of stuff. So, think about that and think about where you're at in the country. Some of these people who are near bigger cities, you probably have the same opportunities that we have in our cities.
And I think people may not think about as well that when you're in a big city and another big city is only 100 miles away or whatever, or an hour or two away, don't forget to watch and look at the websites for the radio stations that are in the nearby city. Many times that you're still in their zone for prizes. Sometimes you're not, but sometimes you are. So just having the ones in your own city may limit you as well.
Yeah, a lot of times it's up to a lot of stations, sometimes are 150 miles away. And why I'm not driving 150 miles for the $50 gift card, some of these give away overnights or trips or things like that that you want to look at and consider. Again, it's reading the rules and understanding if you're eligible or not.
Yep.
What is a way that people do not enter currently or not often that you think will be part of how people enter in the future?
Yeah, I would think that with the new 5G cell stuff coming out, I think a lot of sponsors and a lot of agencies are going to be moving more things to the cell phone. And I think a lot of the people, especially older people, aren't using their cell phone, think that it's very difficult to use. If you look at the way they've been programming them now, the screens have a lot of high resolution so you can read it properly. They're optimizing the forms so that you're not filling out a form that was just transferred from a computer screen. It's now designed specifically for a cell phone. I think we're going to see more and more requirements to enter via cell phones. In fact, I would think that maybe in the future, not too long from now, we may even have some entries by voice instead of even typing them in. So I think that sponsors are going to be looking for that kind of thing, something more of that. The other thing I think that's probably coming is, you've seen this now, there's a lot of influencers out there, people who are becoming influencers, who are helping promote products. These are third-party people who just decide they're going to be their business. And they're creating videos to influence people to go to somebody's product. I'm expecting to see a lot of these influencers now injecting some kind of code in their videos that you'll have to then enter somewhere else in order to win something. I think that's going to be coming not too long from now.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, the hobby is always changing. I mean, when you started Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, Snap, none of these existed.
Well, I think that sometimes we all have to sit back a little bit and think about what it is we have in this hobby. And remember that the sponsors and the judging agencies are not in the business of making sweepstakes. Their business is something else. And sweepstakes is just one part of their marketing. They've got television ads, they've got newspaper ads, they've got magazine ads, they got sponsoring races. And we tend to think that, a sweepstakes is their big thing, it's their only thing, and it's what they're doing to get sales. And it's really just one part of a big program that they have. They could be doing 10 different things at one time, and sweepstakes is one of them. And one of the things that marketing people do a lot in sponsors is they're constantly testing. Testing is their middle name. They are doing a sweepstakes and they're looking to see how many entries they get back. At the same time, they're doing an ad in a magazine and seeing how many responses they get. At the same time, they're sponsoring a race someplace that doesn't have a sweepstakes, and they're measuring which one gives them the best result so that they know what to do the next time. And so, we have to step back at times and realize that sweepstakes is a marketing tool.
Yeah, you still need to realize it's a business.
Yep.
It's a fun hobby for most of us, but for them, it's a business, and it's how they make revenue for their companies and how they drive sales.
And we have to treat them as such.
Yes, I don't think yourself or myself has said that. Both of us are very advocates for that, and being nice and appreciative to these sponsors and these marketing companies, and not getting bent out of shape when things go wrong. Things will go wrong. You're going to have issues. But a lot of times they really get fixed well and they get taken care of, and you don't need to go on social media and bash them and say you're never going to buy their product again. You just need to talk to them and explain things.
Yep, absolutely.
What, so I've been asking this as I've been fortunate to have you and other people on. Who's someone that you want to throw a challenge out there that they should come on here and they should do this, or they should do an iWIN live? Somebody that you would find interesting.
Actually, I'm probably more interested. Well, I'm always interested in somebody who can teach something. I mean, I'm definitely not looking for somebody who's got a secret to how to win, because I'm one of these people when I meet somebody new on an airplane or something and I get to be talking about sweepstakes, which I always do, much to my wife's consternation. The first thing they ask me is, what's your secret? And my answer always is, my secret is that there is no secret. And I then proceed to tell them about odds and things like that. But if I can learn something from somebody, that's who I want to see. I'm not sure I can give you a name, except I would love to see somebody from one of the new generation of judging agencies, I guess you'd call them. I mean, if there was some way you could get Dojo Mojo, Rafflecopter, WooBox, any of those guys on. I mean, I tried to get them at the last convention. I spent a lot of effort talking to those guys, trying to get them to come to the convention. But maybe the answer is that you might have a better chance at it because you can interview them and they don't have to travel. So they can maybe do that sometime. I have a ton of questions I would love to ask those folks. And again, I'm not looking for secrets. I'm just curious as to how they do things and why they do things.
Sure. No, I love talking to judging agencies. And I think you and I both, when given the opportunity to ask questions when we've won things, take that and use that information. And I've been fortunate enough now with some of the convention and the doings to interview certain judging agencies and really kind of pick their brains and learn from them.
Well, one of the things, I mean, that whole business is changing, and it's changing sweepstakes. And I think it's having a big effect on the whole industry because now sponsors can run a sweepstakes for $50 where they might have spent literally $1 million in the past. They go with these small outfits, and it's changing how we do things. You never know who's now doing the judging. You don't know if these people really understand the government's rules for doing things, what an alternate means of entry, why they have to have them, et cetera. And we're relying on these people. And I think a lot of us then have to look at it and say, is this a sweepstakes I want to enter? Because I'm not sure they know what they're doing. And one of the things that's happened is the FTC, who really has the rights, the job of monitoring, they've sort of stepped back and they're not really monitoring much anymore. So we're sort of on our own.
There's so much, and I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but I think that's one of the differences with iWIN is,
yes.
Did I really try and point that out and say, hey, look, I'm not really familiar with this company. I've never seen how they do business. So you might want to be a little careful. You might not want to mail 50 entries because they may get thrown in the dumpster.
Yeah. For the last sweepstakes convention, I actually ran a couple of sweepstakes with Rafflecopter and some of the other firms. I actually did that so I can understand what they do at the end of the sweepstakes. How do they send you the data? How do you decide who the winner is? And then the sponsor is now responsible for sending out the prizes, whereas in the past, the judging agency might have done that. So you're really at the mercy of the person who's now doing this. And the big judging agencies are all in a quandary over this. I mean, we've seen so many of them go bankrupt and go out of business. They don't know how to handle this stuff. They've got these big bureaucratic departments, and here's these guys who can, one-man company can run a promotion that looks like it came from somebody with 100 people.
Yeah, and it's very different. I talk about this often because the companies you're bringing up, like a Rafflecopter, like a Gleam, for those who don't know, basically it's third-party software that you or I or a big company can kind of use as a platform to run a sweepstakes very inexpensively. They tell you who wins, but then it's totally up to you. So I'm always reluctant to put certain ones into iWIN because if you win and company A, B, or C doesn't send you your prize or doesn't do anything, you really don't have a whole lot of recourse. You have to continue to interact with that company. You can't go to Rafflecopter or Gleam and say, hey, look, I won this. Where's my prize?
Yep.
They're going to say, well, in our terms, you agreed you'll get it fulfilled by the company who paid us just to pick the name.
Yeah, and one of the things that I found out was that when they get done and they send the results to the sponsor, again, who could be anybody, in that case, it was me running the sweepstakes, they're also sending the IP addresses of the people who entered. And as a result, I mean, that sponsor could decide that if 3 or 4 people enter from the same IP address, maybe it's somebody with multiple emails and they're not going to give them a prize. So there's a whole bunch of things that I think we all have some learning to do as this process goes on.
You do, and you start to make mental notes. You know, I always talk about making mental notes when you see what wins or what doesn't win. You know, Fanatics just gave away all those, you know, prizes, and it was ran by a company, but we really didn't know that at first. And because it was a charity where you pay for charity tickets, or there was an alternate means of entry, some of them have been ran really on the up and up, and others have not. So I really wasn't sure. Fortunately, that one did a stellar job. You know, I was fortunate enough to win. I know other people who have won, and those prizes were amazing. Did you enter? I know you had to enter for them.
Yeah, again, I got in late, so I paid the penalty of not winning, but I keep trying, and I keep looking for things like that. I'm really spending time now trying to find things where you get in on the first day. I mean, find them first and then get in on the first day.
Yeah, I mean, I still, my biggest thing is like the short run, you know, the quick. You know, we had one the other night on Twitter, and it was like 34 minutes. And there were entry periods that were 5 minutes and 1 minute. We had a bunch of winners because it was just, there was only like 30 or 40 of us doing it, and they were fantastic prizes. So I really try and find those. What's the best advice that you can give sweepers in general?
I guess I would give the same advice to sweepers as I give to other people in places I've worked and so on. I think that you should set some reasonable, achievable goals that you have, whether it's to win a certain prize or whatever. You should work and do what's necessary to achieve those goals. I mean, I've seen people say, well, I think positive. You know, the whole thing for a while there was thinking positive was make you win. Well, but thinking positive isn't going to make you win. It's thinking positive, therefore you're going to do the things that make you win. And so I have this little thing that I sort of use, and I've used in business. I call it the 10% rule. So my definition of the 10% rule is you've been going along, you haven't won what you wanted to win. For me, like for a while, I wanted a big screen television. I got jealous of people with these televisions. I had a 45-inch television. My friends all had 65-inch televisions. And I decided I've got to win one of those 65-inch televisions. Well, I went a little overboard, I guess, because in 90 days, I won 6 of them, and I had to decide what to do. But getting back to this 10% rule, I decided there were some things I needed to do differently. And the problem is you do 1 or 2 of these things differently, and maybe it improves your results 1% or 2%. It's not measurable. 1% is kind of hard to measure, and it gets demoralizing because you don't see any improvement. However, if you did 10 things that each contributed 1%, the next thing you know, you've got a 10% improvement. And that's measurable. That's recognizable that you've achieved something. And it doesn't mean you have to do 10 new things every day. It may be 1 day each week or something. If you're not, you know, the old story, if you're not on Instagram, maybe you should be, or if you're not doing a certain kind of search on Google, you should be. And so I look at those kind of things that, you know, you can't just do one thing to improve your results. You may have to do many different things and put them all together so that, you know, you can do something. So I like to think that there are things out there that people can be challenged. They've just got to set some goals and make sure that they do what's necessary to achieve them.
I couldn't agree more with that entire statement. I think that's fantastic. I think goals are excellent. It's fun to have Lucky Charms and pixie dust and rainbows and unicorns, but you and I both know the people who work at this daily are the people that you see have success and win quite often.
Yeah, the last thing I would say as part of that is, now this is just me, I'm not saying everybody has to do the same, but in my life, I've learned, I never say, well, I've done the best I can. to me, that's not in my definition. I mean, it doesn't matter whether it's sweeps or anything. If I didn't achieve the results, then I didn't do the best I could. That's my answer. And that's what drives me. And so when I want to do the best I can, but I don't end up at the end not achieving it and say, well, I did the best I can, because to me, that's not a good answer.
You know, one question I haven't asked, and then I'll let you guys go ahead and put out some questions, and we'll ask Steve some questions. What's an odd prize or just a really odd trip, something just really unusual that you won, or a trip that you got to do something really, really unusual?
Well, I mean, every trip I've been on, to me, I like your terminology. I'm not calling them trips anymore. I'm calling them experiences. I got that from you. To me, I know that there are people who don't enter for concerts or don't enter for this or that because they have no interest. I look at whether it's a concert or whatever, I look at that as an opportunity to get to someplace new that I can do something while I'm there. And so every trip I've been on is an experience, whether it's getting to ride on the front seat of a train, looking down the tracks, or sitting in a concert hall like I did in Amsterdam, actually sitting on the stage with the orchestra, to meeting various, meet and greet. To me, they're all something special. I don't know that I could think of any one. I mean, we've won some crazy other things, a full-size Pepsi machine that weighed 3,000 pounds. It took 4 guys to get it in and out of my garage after I donated it to Father Joe. And I mean, I look back on that stuff, and it's just fun to think about it.
Huh. Well, we'll take some questions. So go ahead and shoot off the questions on here, and I'll start looking through these and ask some questions. Super Bowls. Super Bowls are on everyone's list. How many Super Bowls have you been to?
4 times. We've won the Super Bowl 4 times, and again, every one has been a great experience. Just tremendous. And I mean, I won't bore everybody here, but I've got stories of each one, how special they were.
What was the favorite one? What's the favorite one you've been to?
Probably the one in Houston. We had this crazy thing where it was run by a sports agent, and he didn't know that he needed to make a reservation for the hotel a year in advance. He tried to make it like a week in advance. And so he had us in some little dinky place that had, a cage where the clerk was. And we were out walking to go to dinner, and we were supposed to meet him, and he calls and he says, well, I can't make the dinner, but the $2,000 that goes with your prize, I just left it in the nightstand next to your bed when you get back to the hotel. And sure enough, we got back there, and there was $2,000 in cash sitting in the nightstand in this little crazy hotel. But the seats were on the overhang over the edge of the field, the mid-level, sitting out, and where they served you food right there and served you dinner and the whole thing. So it was kind of special.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, because good Super Bowl tickets are few and far between in sweepstakes. And I don't think a lot of people realize that. And, I've only been to 2, but one I had fantastic seats. I was in the end zone, 10, 11 seats off the field. The other one, weren't bad, upper deck, maybe 20-yard line or so. But normally that's where you're at. You don't get dinner and a meal and a fantastic view too often. Somebody asked if you still do mail-ins, which you've covered, you do. Is there still a Northern Westchester club?
I don't know about that. I mean, I know there's something around there, because when we won our trip to the Super Bowl in New York, I invited all the local clubs to come join us at the hotel, and we had a big party, and we had about 25 people show up from all around New York. But I don't know the specific club name.
Do your wife and you enter under the same ISP?
Well, I guess that's an interesting thing. I'm probably different than most people that you've got. I'm the only one entering, actually. I don't have a big family. My daughter doesn't enter. My wife doesn't enter. I do enter for her and for me. And the answer is yes. Right now, I've been entering under the same IP address. I'd like to change that. I'm just kind of lazy and I haven't done it. I mean, I'd like to do me and then maybe go down somewhere else in my facility or go out to Starbucks and enter for her. I've been just too lazy, and I enter for both of us at home.
I'm sure everyone appreciates.
But I don't have any kids or other members of the family entering. I'm the only one.
Yeah, and I get that question often too. And like, I am terrified of entering like my father. My brother actually has started to enter, but if I entered my father from something, I would get a phone call. He'd say, I got this email about 2 weeks ago, and they said I won a car. It would be something fantastic. And I'd be like, well, what'd you do, Dad? Well, that's why I'm calling you.
Well, there is a solution. There is a solution to that I used for a while, some years ago. You can go to Google Voice on the web, and you can get for free another phone number that you can use for a person in your family who's in another state. So let's say that you've got a teenage son who's in college in another state. You want to enter for them. You can create an email for them, of which only you read, not them. You can have a phone number for them that you get free from Google Voice and have it forwarded to one of your phone numbers. And the only thing you get out of it is their physical address so that something can be mailed to them physically. But you don't bother them by having the phone ringing, and you don't bother them by getting emails that they're not going to respond to. You take care of them. And I did that for a few years for a while.
See, I think it's a time thing with me too.
Yeah. Sure, it takes time.
Do you have any other hobbies besides sweepstakes?
Yeah, walking, kind of crazy, but I mean, I want to walk an hour or two every day. So I do that. I am a classical music fanatic, so I listen to classical music. So I guess those three things, and then just studying business in general. I love to read about the history of companies and how they got started. I love reading the history of Google or the history of Apple or any of those kind of companies.
What's a typical day in the life of Steve? If you're at home, we're not on one of the 15 trips a year. We're just a day at home.
Actually, I think when I'm on a trip, I don't change very much, which is my wife's consternation. I'm usually up at 4:30 in the morning. Actually, I get up probably an hour and a half before my wife, and as a result, I can spend more time with her later in the day. So I'm starting to read my email and reading some news and doing some things early in the morning. Take a break for breakfast, take a break to go for a walk. I'm back on the computer off and on all day. And then I probably don't go to bed till 10:30 or 11 o'clock, again, an hour and a half after my wife has gone to bed. So I'm just back and forth on it for a couple hours and then take a break and go for a walk or do something else. But I'm really spending a good part of the day doing sweeps.
Besides a car, what's on the list that you really want to win right now?
I'm not sure that there's anything. I'd like to win a sound bar, actually, just because I don't have one. I mean, that seems like a sexy new device. The other things that I've wanted to win, I've pretty much gone on. I told you about the televisions, and the same thing happened with the smartphones. Everybody had brand new smartphone, and I said, oh, I got to win a new smartphone. So I just set out to win a smartphone. And it was another one of those things. I think over 3 or 4 months, I won 10 smartphones, and I just picked out the one I wanted and sold the rest. So I really I can't think of anything else that I'd want to win. There's certainly some trips I still want to win. I mean, I've been in 106 countries, and I can think of, well, probably not 100, that's an exaggeration of, and many that I haven't been, but there's more that I haven't been to that I would really want to go to. I haven't been to South Africa. I mean, there's just dozens of places I still want to go.
I know that you, me, and Valerie all share the one same trip that we really want to win.
Yeah.
And I'll let you tell it, because it's on all three of our bucket lists.
Yeah, top of my bucket list is a trip to Antarctica, and actually there was an interesting one that Valerie and I apologize, Tom, although I don't think you were available, but I didn't tell you about. But Valerie and I entered one for really wasn't a contest per se. There was a scientific trip to Antarctica last November, and they were looking for people, basically citizen scientists, and you had to write an essay and explain how you qualified for that. And it was literally camping in a tent on the ice in Antarctica, doing scientific measurements with a team. I think there was a team of, well, they were looking for 3 people, but the team was like 15 total people. You stopped in Chile on the way. You got some advanced lessons. You went to Antarctica for a week. You came back, and then you became part of a team to help them publicize the fact that they were trying to do scientific studies to show how plastics have invaded everywhere in the world, including the ice of Antarctica. And I entered that and had some high hopes, but Val and I both feel our ages sort of did us in. I mean, part of it was hiking to the physical South Pole and doing things like that. And they probably looked at us and said, we don't think you guys should do that.
Well, you still got time. You may get this Antarctica one out yet. There was just Omaze just did one a few months
they
ago.
did.
I know.
So I tried for that too.
One thing that somebody asked that I'll actually answer, and while we're talking about trips, somebody said, does the hotel take a large amount of money for a down payment because they had a situation where they took a large amount down. So when you're checking into a hotel, just like a rental car, a lot of times they'll put a hold on your credit card. But if you don't have a credit card and you use a debit card, that money actually is held. Every hotel has different policies. So,
boy, when I think back on it, I mean, now that you asked me that question, I am hard pressed to think. I mean, 292 trips. I would think 2 or 3 or 4 have asked me to give them money ahead of time, and I've never had to pay. I've never had to do any money otherwise. I just don't.
But when you check into a hotel, you typically give a credit card.
You're right.
So,
you do have to give them a credit card. You're right. I didn't think of it that way.
And they're going to take a certain amount of money for incidentals, and every hotel's different. But some of these trips, you stay at some very high-end hotels, and the amount per day that they will hold is very great. Well, if this is a debit card, that money is actually going to be pulled out. So I always encourage people, have an actual credit card or be aware of that. Every now and then, I usually do an iWIN Live about trips and trip questions in general.
Yeah, and there are certainly some credit cards you can get that have no fees and so on. And you can just, I have a couple that I have that I've never used, literally not even used once. And so they're always available for something special like that.
Yeah, because that can really trip you up. And I've had members contact me and say, Tom, what do I do? I'm in this hotel. They put this hold on. A lot of times you can also talk to the manager, explain the situation, and they may make a lesser hold. The thing is, once they do it, the amount of time to reverse it takes a few days. So it's not a quick fix. I'm sure of this, but I'm curious what your answer is. Have you ever won a European river cruise?
Have not won one, but we won what I call the end pieces. So we won airfare to go. We won to stay in the Marriott for 3 days in Hungary to start. Then we paid for the cruise. Then we won to stay at the Marriott in Prague for 3 days, and we won for the airfare to come home. So it's sort of a combination kind of thing.
What's the biggest prize you've ever won?
Probably, well, I've won some trips that are in the $17,000, $18,000, $19,000 range. Probably the biggest one that I actually didn't hit me like that, I've talked about to people. Some years ago, maybe 10 years ago, there was a sweepstakes being run that had 1 million Delta miles along with 20 free nights at Omni hotels. And so a lot of people, most people I know refused to enter that because they thought of the taxes for that. It was valued at $30,000 was the value of the trip. And so people discussed it and said, there's no way they're going to enter it. And I looked at it and said, hey, that's for me. And I won. And when the lady called me up to talk about it, I very politely said, well, how are you going to handle this for the tax things? It seemed to me that I'm certainly not going to use all those miles in 1 year. They're going to be spread out over so many years. Can you spread out the value of the prize over so many years? And again, I was very polite and explained what I was doing. And she says, well, you know, Omni Hotels and Delta are actually getting out of the business of working together. And those 1 million miles were just left over from another program. And so we just won't charge you the $10.99 for the Delta miles. We'll just put a $10.99 in for the hotel. And so they basically wiped $20,000 off the value of the prize on the spot.
Wow.
Never hurts to ask.
I know somebody said, I know you work really hard at entering, but do you have a lucky charm?
No.
I was curious. That's a good question. I like that one. Do you use decorated envelopes, colored 3x5s?
Nope. I think probably I haven't sent a decorated envelope in 10 or 15 years. I used to send some in to the usual, the locals that might pick something like that. I have been using white envelopes ever since.
What do you remember your biggest instant win?
Yes, I was shocked. Normally I don't say that because I've seen people over the years say, "Oh, I'm so surprised. I'm so surprised." And what's my always answer? Why are you surprised? You entered. You have to expect to win. That's one of my favorite expressions, expect to win. But normally when you're doing an instant win, you expect smaller prizes. And then, at the end, they draw the big prizes. So I was doing an instant win, and I honestly can't remember the sponsor, but well, I think it might have been Coca-Cola. I'm not sure. Anyway, right on the thing that I spun the wheel and I won 2 airline tickets to go anywhere in the world. And I was really surprised that they would have such a big prize as an instant prize online.
I just had a member, in fact, it'll be in Thursday's issue, just win a decent cash prize on an instant win and sent me the screenshot. And kind of like you say, not a whole lot surprises me. And it was just an email. Hey Tom, just wanted to let you know this happened today. And I looked, I was like, wow, because you're right. You don't, you win product coupons and gift cards and things. And you don't expect very big wins usually.
Hopefully everybody knows to have some kind of screen capture available to them and they've practiced using it. And as you know, Windows now has that thing built in where you can even take a piece of the screen. People should look at it and see it's one of the functions of Windows, not just print screen, but actually take a piece of the screen. And when something comes up like that, you need to save it because every once in a while, something will hiccup and you've got no proof that you actually won.
Right, especially on the big ones to do a screenshot. And if you don't know, if you can't figure it out, worst case, at least pull out your phone and take a photo of it.
And of course, people should know how to do a screen capture of their cell phone as well. That's built into your phone that you can capture the screen.
Yeah, in fact, there was a lot of talk on Discord today because there's a new sweepstakes going on right now that you have to do a screenshot from an Instagram story, and it's really tripping a lot of people up because it's different. In fact, that will also be in Thursday. I'll be talking a little bit more on that to help see people on that. Let's see if we got a few last questions, and then we'll wrap this up. Do you subscribe to any sweepstakes newsletters?
Yeah, I think I've got 4 that I'm paying for. And of course, I equate whether they're newsletters in print or online. I wrap them into one thing. I think
right, newsletter sites in general.
So obviously, iWIN is a valuable part of my library, and then I've got some others that I regularly go to that you don't have to pay. And again, that's part of my research. And there is no one newsletter. I think even you have to admit there's no one newsletter that has everything. Different editors specialize in different things. They can't find everything, and they don't have a room for everything. And so quite often I'm finding a few things on each newsletter, and that's what gets me going.
No, I agree with that. And people have met me at the conventions and in this past one. I do always recommend having at least a second source, if not a third source, combined with always searching on your own for that reason. But yeah, look at them. Hopefully iWIN's one that works with the way you enter, what you enter from, and it pays for itself. That's what I always tell people is any of these should pay for themselves.
And that's one of the things I tell when I meet people and talk about sweepstakes, and they say, well, how can you afford this, that, and the other thing? And I say, hey, all you have to do is win one prize and it pays for it. How can you believe that it's not cost effective? If you're not going to win one prize, then why are you even doing it? Why,
No, you're right. But it goes back to anything else. I always compare newsletters, sweepstakes sites to gym memberships. If you sign up for them, you really need to make every effort to use them and get the full benefit of them. Otherwise, you're not going to see the results.
Right.
So, anything to add? Any last minute comments, tips, advice?
No, a couple of things that I've sort of professed to people over the years. One, I think people don't do enough to see what added features there are on their own computer. I mean, when you're sitting there and you've got Google Chrome or Internet Explorer, whatever it is that you're using as a browser, and you look at all the features that are built into pull down menus at the top, take the time to go up to one of those and just try a few things. You'd be surprised at some of the things you find that you can be using. And then lastly, probably, is people I think have overlooked the tremendous value of knowing how a search engine works. I mean, you can just put a few words into the Google frame there, but if you really go in and spend a little bit of time and understand some of the things that you can do, I think people would be amazed at what you can find really nice by using a search engine that people are just not doing.
Well, excellent. Well, it's been an honor and a privilege. I can't thank you enough personally for doing this. I was very excited, as you know, when we chatted about this a couple months ago. But thank you very much for joining me. Thanks for being part of iWIN. All your support and advice over the years that we've known each other. I look forward to many more conventions together.
Me too. I hope we'll see each other in Arizona.
I do too. Well, thank you. I am going to end this for everyone. And guys, just remember, next Tuesday, 8 o'clock, we have another one, special guest. The following Tuesday, Karen Goodwin will be here, also at 8 o'clock. Thanks for joining us.